Welcome to the Naturally Antique Art Studio. Today we're going to be designing raspberries. My process always begins in my sketchbook. I had drawn up these leaves maybe a couple weeks ago, and I didn't really know what was going to come of them, but then I had the idea to draw some berries on them. So I looked it up, decided that raspberries were the best fit with these leaves, and I went in and just penciled in where I thought they could go and then colored them in. This is the result of what it looked like in my sketchbook. This is where we bring things into the digital world. So I grab my sketchbook and I put it on my scanner and I throw that stack of rocks on it to basically weigh down the binding. And then I open it up in Photoshop. So this is me cutting out the background, and I'm just sort of soften up the edges and I make it transparent. Then I go in and I kind of clean up any messy marks, things that the eraser didn't quite get, or any hairs or dust that are left on the scanner. I clean that up during that process. Here is where I recolor the background, and then I recolor the graphite to my typical brown that I go with when I create my artwork, and then I begin establishing my base layer. Now, the base layer is really important because it is essentially the framework for which all of the other layers lay on top of, and because of that, I don't have to worry about coloring in the lines for every single layer. I only have to do that for this initial base layer. So you'll see me just kind of going in, outlining things, filling it in, and that just gives me a solid foundation to work on. Now, the way that I do my color work is, imagine a stack of papers. You have your front cover, which is the pencil layer, the graphite, and then you have your back cover, which is the background. And so everything else lives in between each of those. So now you can see this is where I begin the shading process. And so usually I'll just kind of go easiest to most difficult, and I follow a pattern, I follow a process. And so my process is I do my initial shading, then I do my highlight, and then I go in and do my detail shading and my detail highlight, and then I finish things off with a white highlight over the top. And so you can really see that on these leaves. I do my shading, here's my highlight, and then here's my detail shading, and then my detail highlight once I'm finished with that. Yeah, you can see that going in now. And then once I'm done with that detail highlight, I'll go in and do a white highlight just around the edges and then just in some of the brighter areas, just to kind of complete the look of that. And the white just adds such a sparkle to the artwork. I love it so much. It's my favorite part of the whole process. And I just kind of add a little bit of definition to the veins of those leaves. So you can see all of the leaves are done. This is me going in and doing the same thing with the flowers. We've got the shading going in, and I'm really focusing on where things are either overlapping is where I'm putting the shading, or I'm putting it where there's depth or little wrinkles in the petals. And I've got like a yellow highlight. So typically these blossoms for raspberries are supposed to be white, right? But since I do my background white, we can play with the color a bit. And so I decided to go with a very light pink and yellows, just to kind of balance out that white and add a bit more interest to it. There are variations of raspberry blossoms that did lean a bit pink, and so I felt like I could take that creative freedom there. So this is me going in and doing the white highlights now, and just getting that finished on those blossoms. And then once we are done with this, oh yeah, and the centers. Forgot about the centers. So the centers are really fluffy, and this is where the actual raspberry grows out of. And so I decided to go with this green, and then these little red dots are actually where like the raspberries, they grow out in between. That's kind of like where the little hairs are when you see an actual raspberry. So that was kind of fun, doing a bit of research on that and figuring out how they transition from blossom to berry. And being able to capture that in my artwork. So I'm just going in, throwing in some white highlights, and here we are for the raspberries. I definitely saved the most difficult part for last, so I went in zoomed in really close and just shaded between each of the berries, and then added a bit of a pink highlight over the top just to sort of round them out, and then added these little detail marks. And then this is where I started to go about my usual process where I just outline each object, you know, and then I looked at it and I was like, that looks awful. And so then I went in and made some tweaks where I just kind of outlined the outside and then a few particular spots on the berries, and I think that turned out so much better. And then this is me going in and just doing that like sort of half developed berry, you know, between the phase of, you know, full berry and blossom, and got that one established. And this one took a little while because I had to go in between every single little one of those dots and just make sure that we had that depth there with the darker color. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. Just throwing in a little bit of sparkle with the white highlights over the top, and this is the final result. I'm so delighted with how these berries turned out. I knew it had to become a trailing botanical pattern for wallpaper or fabric, and so this is how the pattern turned out. I did record that process, but I had some computer glitches, so you get to see it on the back end now. And I did decide to recolor it into some blackberries, and I thought that turned out super cute. So I would love to know what you guys think. Do you imagine this in your kitchen? I could totally see this in a cottage kitchen because I just think that it captures that perfect grandma, vintage, nostalgic aesthetic that I'm just so obsessed with. You can purchase the fabric, the wallpaper, or the art print itself over on my website, naturallyantique.com. You can find the link in the description. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video and learn a bit more about my process. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment, and I will get back to those as soon as I can. Thanks so much. Bye.